Hello there my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these super elegant wire crochet bracelets. And you can of course customize them to suit your personal style depending on the materials that you use. Now there's also going to be matching rings and earrings for this design. Once they're available they're going to be in a playlist which I'll link in the description box down below. And all the pieces will also be available for sale in my shop if you like any of the pieces from this tutorial. Again, you can check that out down below the video. Now if you want to support me in any way, you can of course always like, share and subscribe, that's much appreciated. And if you want to go further than that, you can join my channel or even on Patreon, where you can get early access, exclusive content and more. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make this bracelet, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now I'm using a regular round copper wire and the gauge is a 0.4mm. It's thin enough that we can use it to wire crochet with, but still has some strength to it. And then we'll need some beads to add to the design, and I'm using these 3mm bicone beads. And I just chose two different colours of green to alternate between, but you can of course use just one colour or even more. You also don't have to use bicones, you could just as well use round beads or anything else you'd like. And finally we need a clasp, so I'm using a lobster claw clasp and extended chain and a few jump rings to put it all together, but you can of course choose whatever kind of clasp you prefer. As for the tools, we need some flush cutters so we can cut our wire of course. I've got some chain nose and tweezer nose pliers to help manipulate the wire. And lastly we of course need a crochet hook as well. This is a 1.25mm, just make sure it's on the smaller side like this one. Now like usual you can always find the tool and material list in the description box below the video, so feel free to check that out along with useful links. Otherwise let's get it all ready and let's get started. Now as for the wire, I'm going to work with it still attached to the reel because it's hard to know exactly how much we're going to need, and also there's no need to cut it off. So we need to grab our crochet hook, and then of course the wire I'm working towards the end, just leaving a bit of a tail there to hold on to and also to be able to finish it off at the end. So first we're going to just make our first loop, and I'm just doing that by basically twisting my hook, and that makes our first loop. So from here, obviously how you hold your wire is up to you and what you find comfortable, but what we need to do is basically a chain of loops first of all. So I'm going to have my hook through the loop, then I'm going to grab the wire that's behind, and this is the long end that's still attached to the reel. I'm holding on to the tail here just to begin with until we get a bit more work to hold on to. And I'm just going to grab the wire and pull it through the loop to the front, and then on the front here we're going to use the hook to also help create nice and consistent loops. So we're going to push the hook through to this shaft part that's right before the handle, and then I like to just pull it out a little bit more. Now to flatten this down I'm going to twist the hook so the hook part is away from me, and then push it down so it ends up sitting flat next to the other one. Now the first couple of loops here will be the most fiddly because obviously there's not a lot to hold on to, but it does get easier. So the loops are now sitting flat next to each other there, and we basically just need to keep doing this for however long we want the bracelet to be. Now all you have to make sure of is that it's an uneven number that we end up with. So for instance, this is the third one, that would be the uneven number. Obviously this is not long enough for a bracelet, but we have 3 loops now, 1, 2, 3. So just grab the wire, bring it through to the front, push your hook down and then pull it out a bit, and then we twist and push, and then I have 4 loops. So just make however many loops you need, like I said, to reach the length you need, and just make sure it's an uneven number. So I've ended up having 53 loops on mine, and if it gets a little bit twirly like this, don't worry about it, it will straighten out as we keep going. So this is going to be my length of bracelet. Now from here we need to then start making the sides, and we're going to start going down one side. So from here we need to make another 3 loops. So this is my length. I'm going to put my hook through and then grab the wire, pull through to the front here, push my hook through to that shaft part, and then just pull it out a bit. Now from here what I want to do is actually make my loop go out to the side more. So I'm just going to make it go out to the left of that final loop, and you can just kind of change how you're holding it, and otherwise keep making loops from there. So like I said, 3 in total just to begin with here. So that's 2. Grab your wire, pull up a loop, rotate your hook and flatten it down, and that is 3 away from that last one. That's part of the length of the bracelet there. Now from there, what we actually need to do is come back up you could call this the spine, the initial chain that we made. So we need to kind of just move it around so we're holding it in the right direction. So come back down the chain. So these 3 extra loops we just made, what we need to do with them is come back around to start shaping the sides. But to be able to connect it, we just need to make one more loop. So we actually need 4 loops here. Again, remember just to flatten that out. So we have the 4 loops, and then on the inner chain we need to skip 2 and go into the 3rd one from the end. So just make sure we identify the end one. Just kind of get everything into position the best you can. I have my 4 final extra loops that I just made, and then I need to make sure my hook is through that final loop, so kind of the active loop you could say, and then count back from the very last one of the bracelet. That's 1, 2, 3, and then we go down through that 3rd one with the active loop still on the hook. So we're going to have 2 loops on the hook now. Push that all the way down, and then just push them nice and close together. Now grab the wire, come up, pull up a new loop, and now we're going to rotate the hook so it comes back out in the direction to the same side that we're working on. So now I'm going to stick, in this case how we're holding it, it's on the right side. And just make sure that loop comes back out to the right side. So we're sticking on this right side of the chain all the way down. So this was 1 loop in the next one. In the beginning again, it can just be a little bit fiddly because obviously we're just holding on to the short little end. But as we move along, we get more to hold on to. Pull up your wire, make a loop, flatten it down. And we basically need the same amount of loops, so that was 2. And then we need that 4th one to be able to connect back into the spine. So just make your 4th loop here, and you want to bring it down closer into the spine and have this chain of loops that we just made kind of curving around and forming more of a side design to this. But again, making sure my hook is still through that final active loop. The last loop that we went through in the spine, which is where this chain is coming from, we need to skip 1 and then go through the one after that. So just put your hook through that, pull tight on your active length of wire here that's attached to the reel, and then to kind of lock that in place, we pull up a new loop and then twist the hook out to the side that we're working on and flatten that down, which is now the 1st loop in the next little section that's going to come out from this side. So you can see we are creating these little curved or flourishes, whatever you want to call them, on the side of the piece, and you just want to carry on like that. So that's the 1st loop. Bring up the wire, push the hook, twist it and flatten it down, so that's 2 and 3, and then the 4th one is to be able to connect this chain, so 4, and then we kind of can help the shape along a little bit by just getting that curve in place. But then from the previous connection point, which is where the chain is coming from, we then want to skip one and go through the next one, and then lock that in place by simply pulling up a new loop. And then you repeat again, and you do this all the way down the chain to the other end until we've added these little flourishes or curves on the, in this case, right side with how we're looking at it, all the way down until we get to the other end. So now I reach the end here, and I'm just gonna take the 4 loops that I have and making sure my hook is through that active loop, and then go through the very final loop here, which actually was the first one that we made, but the last one that we have yet to use, and then just shape the little flourish on the side in place, and then pull up a loop to lock it in, and then we finished the whole one side all the way down, as you can see, and it's still wanting to curl up, but now it's mostly wanting to curl because it has the flourishes on one side. So what we need to do now is basically do the same but on the other side. So this loop that I just pulled up, what I'm going to do is straight away take it out and flatten it on the opposite side there, so basically the equivalent on the other side, but this is then going to start out the other side of the piece. So just move it around however you need to, and from here we're going to do the same like I said. So that's 1 loop, and 2, 3, and then we need that 4th one to be able to connect with, and then we take from the very first loop here where it's coming from, we skip the next one, and then we go through the one after that, which is the 3rd one from the end, and make sure we still have the active loop on the hook as well. Push that through, and it's also going to be the same loops that we came through and connected with on the other side. So you can just kind of help the flourishes on the side there get a little bit in the right position. Pull up a new loop to fasten it in place, and then again twist your hook to come back out to the same side and flatten the loop down on that side. And this is then the first loop on the next flourish, which again we need to make 4 in total. So that was 1, and then 2, 3, and the 4th one. Bring it around, skip one, and go through the next one. So we are also now really building up the layers on that middle row, or the spine you could call it, on some of the loops anyway. So again, you can just settle that flourish into place and then lock it into place by pulling up a new loop that we then bring back out to the side that we're working on. And then also you should start to see this straightening out more, but of course if it's still a little bit curly when we're finished with that, we can always adjust that at the end because this is wire after all. So you just want to keep going, making these little flourishes on this side in exactly the same way until we get up to the other end again. Then here on the other end, we just want to make sure we go through the very final loop in the spine. So just do the same thing, skip one and go through that. You can see we then have the first flourish on the other side that we made. And obviously make sure you have that active loop on your hook as well. And then I'm just going to pull up a loop here to lock it in place. We have the other side sorted as well. Now you can see here it's a little bit curvy, so all you do is just basically straighten it out because it is wire. So you just shape it however you need to get it nice and straight. And then from here what we need to do is the final round, you could say, is basically going all the way up the middle. So from this end, I'm just going to put my hook through the loop again. and then I'm just going to rotate it around with the length of the bracelet coming away from me. And then basically I want to move from the loop that this active loop is coming out from, and with that loop on the hook, go down through the next loop in the middle. So now we're just sticking to the very center, basically the spine. Pull the loop tight around the hook so we get them nice and even, and then pull up another loop to the front here, and then with that loop on the hook, put your hook down through the next one, so the very next loop that's in this middle row, or the spine, whatever you prefer to call it, and then pull the loop tight around the hook, pull up a loop so we can go to the next one. So we're basically going all the way down the middle, following the chain of loops that we made at the very beginning and just reinforcing it. So do this all the way down to the other end, and again this should also help hold the shape in place and make it nice and straight. So now I reached all the way down to the other end and I'm just missing the last loop, so I brought up my loop and then just going through the very last one in the spine there, and then just pull the wire tight, and then again I'm going to bring through the wire to create another loop here, and you can push your hook to enlarge it, but we are now done with the wire crochet, so we can just pull it out a bit and we can actually go in and cut off the wire from the reel like that. And I'm just making sure to leave a tail of about 50 centimeters because we're going to use this to add on our beads. Otherwise we can go back to our last loop here that we pulled out and just put your crochet hook back in, but this time pull the wire all the way through, because like I said, we're done making the wire crochet. So now we're just using this tail here to add in the beads like I said, and we are going to be adding them all the way down the spine, basically where we just came up. And of course how you add your beads is really completely up to you. I'm just going to show you how I'm doing it. So first of all I just want to get my wire in the right direction because we're going to move back up here. So it's coming up through that last loop, so I'm just coming around the outside and then back up through that same loop again, also just to kind of secure it in place so it looks a little something like that, and then just pull that nice and tight. And then from here on I'm going to straight away start adding my beads, so of course we just need to have them handy. So I have a few here, and what I'm going to be doing is, like I said, because I'm using two colors, alternate between them, but also I'm going to not add a bead to every single loop here, I'm going to add a bead to every other loop. So I'm just going to add my first one. So you want to let it drop all the way down the wire, and then what I want is for this bead here to sit on top of, in this case, the second loop from the end, so the one next to where we're coming out from, and I want it to sit on top of that sideways so we get the nice color and sparkle rather than the hole sticking out. So I'm going to kind of push that down over that loop, and then we need to take the end of the wire and bring it through on the other side of the loop, and you can try and come in between some of your wires here within the bracelet that we've already made, and then just pull it down nice and gently, and then just make sure you avoid any kink like here that would form a kink. You just want to make sure to undo that, and then gently pull it through, and then as we're pulling it further down to tighten it, just make sure that bead is going to sit on top of that second loop from the end in this case, and sit sideways just like that. So the color is going to show nicely rather than the hole. And then, like I said, I'm going to skip the next loop here, which is basically the one we just went down through. So I need to come up through basically the same loop, but I need to make sure that I'm coming up through a different gap so the wire doesn't just pull straight out again. So again, just go in between some of the wires in the wire crochet that we already made, in a different spot where we brought the wire down through, and I like to put my finger on the bead there to hold it in place while I'm pulling this up. Otherwise you could quite easily pull the bead back out of place or make it looser. So in position to then add the next bead, which in this case I'm going to use the other colour. Just add that on your wire and then let it drop all the way down. And same principle, it's going to sit across the next loop, so we're skipping one in between the beads. So that means the loop that the bead is going to sit on top of, I'm going to basically skip that with the end of the wire and go down through the next one, catching in between some of the wires already in the bracelet that are forming all these loops here already. Pull that down, make sure the bead is going to sit nice and flat on top of the loop, and then get in position for the next bead. So I'm coming up through the same loop like before, but making sure I move to a different area, and there's going to be wires in between them, so it's not just going to pull straight out. Just something like that. And again, put your thumb on the bead so it stays in place, and pull the wire through nice and tight. Make sure we don't get any kinks on the back either. And if you at any point need to, you can always just smooth out your wire. Make sure everything looks nice and neat. And then add the next bead, in this case back to my dark one. Because like I said, I'm alternating the colours as well. And then let it drop all the way down so it can sit over the top of the next loop after that. So you can see here we're skipping a loop in between each of the beads. But that's just what I'm doing. If you want to, you could add a bead on top of each loop or make even bigger space in between. It's completely up to you. Otherwise, just keep going like this all the way down the spine of the bracelet until we get to the other end. And this is then what it looks like once I've made my way all the way down to the other end. So what we need to do now is finish off this length of wire because we're done using it. So you just want to kind of turn it to the back here and then find a place where you can bring this wire in through some gaps in the wire crochet, and just basically end up being able to wrap it around a single wire within what we've already made. So just go through somewhere that's close to where the wire is coming out from, and then have it wrap around the wire in the bracelet. And I like to just do that a couple of times. So again, put it through in the same place and then just pull it tight and make sure your wraps are nice and close together here. And you just need to do this a couple of times, so this should be fine. I'm going to then go in, cut off the excess, and just leaving a short little tail there. Get rid of the rest, and then you just want to make sure to tuck that tail away. So you just push it basically into the wire crochet work. Make sure you can't feel it with your finger, so it's not going to catch or scratch on your skin or clothes. Then of course you just want to do the same with the wire end you have left on the other end of the bracelet here. And then all that's left to do is add our clasp on the ends. So I'm just going to get my jump rings out. Of course we need to open that up. And then all we're going to do is use the very final loop on the end there that's running through the middle, so the spine, and put the jump ring through that. And then attach a clasp. In this case I'm just going to add the extender chain on this end. Like that, and then we just want to close the jump ring back up, and of course then attach the lost or claw clasp, in my case, on the other end in the same way. Now even though this bracelet is pretty nice and flexible, as you can see here, has a nice movement to it, I still prefer to just shape it a little bit before it being completely final. So I'm just going to go into one place from one end there, and start putting a curve into it, obviously with the front of it facing outward, and go from side to side and just add a curve gradually, more and more, and get the ends closer together so we can use the clasp. You can also shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel, but I just find that it'll sit a little bit better on the wrist that way, until we can then use the clasp and you have your bracelet finished and ready to wear. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you liked the final pieces. And don't forget, there will be matching ring and earrings. Once they're available, they're all going to be in a playlist, and I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below. Otherwise, feel free to check out the rest of my channel. I have loads more tutorials within many different mediums and other kinds of content as well. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.